How did you start your artistic career? So, calm down. I was good at that stuff, but it wasn't fulfilling my creative soul. Two things I really like doing, which are maybe kind of weird. I was terrified at the time, but now I see it was the right decision. Deep breaths. Duh. Hello everyone, welcome back. Today is a Q&A video that I've been meaning to do for ages. I've been collecting questions over the past 3 months, and I recently asked if you guys had any new questions. Anyways, I've compiled everything and I've organized it this time into 3 different categories: personal development, creative and practical, and business. While you listen to me waffle on, there's going to be some video playing next to me. These are all paintings that I've done for my Patreons. If you want the full tutorial, like actual explanation of what I'm doing, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. So let's get started. So let's get started with the first section, which is personal development. And by the way, when I say personal development, I mean myself as a human, as a person, but also how it relates to my creative practice. Let's start with the question that I get a lot, and I've answered it in pieces here and there, but I don't think I've ever answered it fully. How did you start your artistic career? Or I think this has been asked in many different ways, but basically, how did you become an artist? I mean, I've always been an artist. I've always been creative. Creativity was my companion since I was a kid. And as an introvert, it suited me really well to pour a lot of time into a single creative activity. It's a very lonesome activity, but you can make it social. So you have a lot of flexibility within the creative world. Anyways, since I was a kid, I was drawing all the time, kind of the typical thing. But as I got older in like middle school, high school, I realized all that time that I loved just sketching and drawing could actually become something. And I realized I was at the top of my class in the art world. So I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I'll just keep doing it. And I love it. So I did photography, drawing, all sorts of things whatever I could do in high school. And then when I went to college, I went to art school. I studied ceramics and drawing. And you couldn't, in that degree, you couldn't like specialize in anything until your till your third year, actually. Your third and fourth year, you could start to specialize. But in the first 2 years, you were forced basically to take a variety of classes. The first whole year was foundations. And in foundations, you learn about all of the foundations of art: drawing, values, scale, perspective, pattern, like everything. I vaguely remember something about color, but that definitely didn't stick with me because I feel like nowadays I'm constantly learning about color for the first time. But anyways, by the third and fourth year, I was like, what am I going to specialize in? I chose ceramics and graphic design. Ceramics was just something that I loved. It was a really big passion of mine at the time, but I didn't really see a future for myself in that world because it was very competitive, very expensive, and I just like doing it for fun. But I did see potential in the graphic design world, and I was learning all of the Adobe programs like Photoshop and InDesign, all of that. And it was in Premiere Pro, like editing video and photo editing, everything. And that really served me well down the road where I am now. Okay, sorry, I had to move. The sun was getting me in the eye. So after art school, I graduated with a specialty in, ceramics and graphic design, but it was 2007. And going into 2007, 2008 was basically one of the economic crises or depressions in the United States. And it was really hard to find any kind of job, let alone a creative job. So on the advice of many older, wiser folk, I decided to go back to school and study. That meant I could defer my student loans, and I could also study something that would potentially put me in an industry where I could get a job. And I chose interior design because it was something creative, it was something that was practical as well. And I did that for 3 years. I graduated early because I was doing summer school and like just working really, really hard. And I graduated in 2010, but around that time I was also falling head over heels for photography. So at the same time as I entered the design world and I started working as a designer, I was also doing part-time photography, just shooting weddings and clients and friends and anything I could do. And I just absolutely loved it. And I was making good money doing design, but I was realizing that it was maybe only like 10% creativity and 90% paperwork and client hand holding and organizing things. You know, I was good at that stuff, but it wasn't fulfilling my creative soul. So I think I latched onto my passion for photography and let that kind of get me through those years. But in doing that, I also grew a big photography business, or not big, but like a very successful photography business. I was a few years in, I was shooting weddings every single weekend. So like 20 to 40 weddings a year, depending on the year, and events and portraits and all sorts of other stuff. And it was really becoming a huge part of my life and a huge passion of mine. Around 2015 is also when I just started drawing a ton again. I think I had opened the floodgates for creativity back in my life with photography, and drawing just became a huge passion again, or it always was, but I was giving myself time to do it. I was very overwhelmed and working myself to the bone in 2015, and I had to choose. I had to decide which path am I going to take, because I can't do all three. So I knew I had saved up enough money to support myself for around 6 months if I didn't make any money doing anything else. So I was like, I'm just going to go for it. I found streaming on Twitch around the same time. So I was like, well, I can start streaming and make money, kinda, while I'm practicing this revival of my drawing and painting. I wanted to learn how to paint, so I was like, I'll just use this as an opportunity. And I also had my photography business still, and that was supporting me along the way. So it was risky in a lot of ways, but it was also, looking back now, I was terrified at the time, but now I see it was the right decision, because it gave me just a little bit of time, that initial year, to just pour everything I was into my businesses, my creative passion. I spent day after day painting and drawing and doing photography and streaming and all of that. And that was like a huge boost. And it made me realize I could do this. It was really hard financially. Like, there were so many years that I had like $100 or less in my bank account, month after month. Sometimes barely $10, but at the time it was what I had to do, and I was paying off my student loans. I was making ends meet, but it was really hard for a few years. I was never as scared or happy or financially strained in my life, and yet again, I was the happiest I had ever been. As some of you know, I also met Wolfie during 2016, and I ended up moving to Scotland 2017, which added a whole other thing to my life and financial strain and everything. And there were so many times I wanted to give up. Wolfie was the most amazing, encouraging cheerleader, for lack of a better word. Every time, which there were many times, I was like, I just need to get a part-time job doing something. I need to like make more money and not put all this pressure on my art. And he's like, no, if you do that, it'll be really hard to go back to being full-time art. And I know you can do this. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll do whatever we have to do. We'll eat homemade lunches and ramen and soup just so you can do this. Like, we'll figure it out. And he was right. Eventually, I got better at planning my time. I got better at creating passive sources of income for myself, like teaching online and making classes. And it all snowballed into where I am now, which is much better financially, but also I just have a more professional approach to everything. I take it very seriously. It's a job. It's not just a fun hobby that I make money doing. Like, it's a job. But because I approach it seriously in some ways, I also allow myself the freedom of creativity, and I don't feel stifled. I don't feel the pressure I used to feel where I was like, oh, I have to do this commission, otherwise I can't pay my bills. I have freedom now where I can choose my projects. And I'm so thankful for those really hard years, because it obviously taught me so much, but it also, it led me to where I am now. As I'm rambling on, I just realized I am kind of answering a few questions that other people have asked. Like Ellie Mae Lynn asked, how have you planned your career in the beginning to become financially stable as an artist? Everything changed when I started seeking or creating passive income sources for myself. Honestly, like, I will shout praises for passive income until I die, because it is the single reason I'm able to do this hiking around the Scotland Coast project, or any projects I choose to pursue that aren't where I'm tied to my desk. Thinking about it as, I have to make commissions to make money, to pay bills, or I have to stream 5 times a week to make enough money to pay bills. That's not passive, that's active. You are stuck in a place doing a thing to actively bring in income. Passive income is where something is making money for you behind the scenes. So you could be doing literally anything and you're still making money. That's where you have the freedom. So what does that look like? For me, it looks like making Skillshare classes, making Gumroad classes, basically selling classes that already exist. I don't have to make them as I go. They exist and someone can buy them. And that's like, that money trickles in every day. Then there's Patreon is a little bit passive, but it's still active, because I do actively every single month. I write newsletters and do my little podcast, and I share reference photos, and I share 2 tutorials, and it's just like every single week there's something I do for Patreon. But there's also 6 years of content that people can watch. So that library of content brings people in, and the active time I put into it maybe keeps them there, or kind of keeps it fresh, I guess. And it also gives me a chance to connect with people, because that's kind of the point. That's something I really love about Patreon. It's like this beautiful little community, and everyone's so inspired and excited to paint. I love that. Oh, and the art books. I made 2 art books last year. Yeah, last year. And now those are for sale on my shop. So that's another source of income. Although I do have to actively pack the orders and ship things, it's still a thing that exists that people can purchase. And I guess prints would be similar. Ellie also asked, how do you cope productivity pressure, if you feel any? Yeah, that's a thing. I think every business owner, no matter what you're doing, you're going to feel that pressure to continue to keep up with your schedule. For me, that's Patreon. So, well, I guess also YouTube, because I really, really try to keep a consistent schedule on YouTube now. And I have for over a year, posting every week, because I know, for me, on one hand, it drives me to continue trying new things, getting better at video editing, which directly impacts my classes. Because I've been posting so many videos over the years on YouTube, that has taught me so much about making videos. Duh. And that helps me make my tutorials and classes better for the paid content. So keeping up with the pressure of the schedule is, of course, a thing. And you all have seen, well, if you watch my vlogs, you've seen me talk about the struggles of feeling pressure to create, feeling pressure to stick with a schedule. And I'm just figuring it out as I go. For me, I think the best thing the thing that I've learned about myself is that I thrive when I have a very solid goal, when I have a purpose, and that purpose changes, and it's okay that it changes. For a long time, I didn't think it was okay to change my purpose, to change my goals and my projects. I thought, oh, I chose this project, I have to do it for 10 years. And it's like, I think more importantly, it's knowing yourself enough to be able to pivot and to give yourself permission to pivot. Pivot! And change your schedule, change what you're doing in order to create a situation for yourself where you can thrive. From Shivani Patel Art. Hey Sarah, I love your art. Thank you. How many years of consistent practice did it take to reach the stage you're currently at, and what does your typical workday look like in terms of time spent painting versus time spent on other work? Oh, I wish I had a magical answer for this. The first couple years, especially from like 2015 to 2017, I painted every day, almost nonstop, because I was also streaming on Twitch at the time. I was basically like full-time streaming, and many, many hours a day behind the camera, talking to people, painting, practicing, like all of that time really kickstarted my painting journey. And I progressed drastically in those first couple of years. I have more plateaus nowadays that I have to work through, which is pretty normal. Like when you first start out, especially if you're like diligent about practicing, you do progress really quickly. And what does your typical workday look like? There is no typical workday. I wake up, answer lots of emails and clear my inbox and do lots of admin for like the first hour or so. But then sometimes I'll go like a month or two where I wake up and the first thing I do is sketch. So 5-10 minutes, even a half an hour, just sketching first thing in the morning. And I really loved that. But then I find that I get really behind in the business stuff. So then I get back into the mindset where I want to just do admin for the first part of the day, get it done, and then have the whole rest of the day to be creative. And the rest of the day can be organized in different ways. Like I'll go out and I'll paint, then I'll come back to the studio and paint even more, or I'll just be in the studio painting. A lot of times I'm making videos, so I'll be doing stuff like this. And it just varies so much, which is what I love about it. Now that I'm doing my big coastal adventure, walking around Scotland's coast and painting along the way, my schedule, my workflow is very not rigid or anything, but it's like more uniform week by week. So I spend 2 to 3 days hiking, and those days I'm painting along the way. And then the days in between that, I do my admin in the morning usually, and then the second half of the day I'm painting based on my walks, my hikes. And all of that combines to the weekend where I can kind of look back and see what I've done throughout the week, kind of pivot based on what happened. And of course, edit videos because I try to put out a video every weekend. Before this coastal journey adventure, I was a little more sporadic. I guess I would get overwhelmed with the admin side of things or the planning side of things. And it felt like I wasn't painting as consistently. So for me, what I find is having like a really good, solid goal or something that's driving me forward in the creation process changed everything. And that's now I feel like I'm actually in a good workflow and I'm going to be progressing again. I guess only time will tell if this is a good thing for me as a business, but it is definitely a good thing for me as a human, as an artist. It's filling my creative soul with so much fire. And yeah, anyway, moving on. Beautiful Ground asks, artists that you like, books that inspire you, what do you want to convey with your art? And Mel said, I second the question about books. Okay, artists that I like. Instead of listing 1,000 names, I'm going to share a link to my Pinterest board that is called Inspiring Art or something. It basically anything I post there, it's like something that jumped out at me and just like made my heart swell. And it's always changing. I'm always adding to it. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I mean, that gives you a good idea of what I like in art, like what styles I like and what I look for, what inspires me. So I'll just put a link to that in the description. In terms of books, I do have a fair amount of art books, but most of them, I don't read art books to learn. I look at them to get inspired. I think I've mentioned this in previous Q&As, but A few of the books that were super inspiring to me when I was younger are Dinotopia by James Gurney. I read those hundreds, if not thousands of times growing up. And the artwork itself just inspired me. I can barely describe how much it means to me. It's like part of me. And that really got me interested in art when I was little, thinking, wow, someone actually painted this? How is this even possible? James Gurney is a magician. And of course, as I got older, I realized you can actually study art. And anyway, those books are beautiful. I highly recommend them. And I also love Nathan Fowkes' work. He has a few books, I think. I also have a few art books that are like the making of Brave. The movie Brave is one of them. I really love that art book. I also really, really love the concept art books for Assassin's Creed, the video game. Also, I used to play that game obsessively, so maybe that's part of it. But the art books are really beautiful. Basically any concept art book for like animated movies and video games, I find beautiful because they show the full process, like the sketches, the different concepts they used with colors and everything, and the character design. It's so inspiring. Probably the two biggest books that have inspired me artistically are related to Lord of the Rings, because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. The first one is The Lord of the Rings Sketchbook by Alan Lee, and the other one is The Middle-earth Traveler by John Howe. But both of them are just full of gorgeous drawings and sketches and paintings and little stories about it, the making of. Oh my gosh, like my heart flutters when I think about it. I think because for most of my life, my creativity was expressed through drawing. Like if I look at the years of my life that I've been doing art, drawing is the majority of that. So any drawing book, any sketchbook, like, oh my gosh, drawing inspires me more than anything. The other part of their question was, what do you want to convey with art, your art? I want to share the beauty of nature. I want to inspire people to go out. I want to inspire people to love and protect our environment. Eliza asks, is the work you're doing recently being collated into a third book or stickers or prints, particularly the circular ones you did during Plein Air Pep? Yes. I've made stickers out of some of those circular paintings I did during Plein Air Pep. I have little sticker packs. I think they might be sold out at the moment, but to be honest, I'm not super excited about producing things to sell at the moment. I'm just interested in making progress with my skills, in going out and experiencing life and putting that back into my art. So when I get sales on my shop, I fulfill them, and that's cool. Thank you, anyone who has bought anything from me. It supports me directly. But I don't have huge ambitions to make products, to sell products. Like maybe in the winter, I'll slow down a little bit and kind of make a plan for my next product, like my next book or something. But for now, I'm just living life and making art. B. Vauchol, sorry if I mispronounced that. What's one of those things you think, I should really practice that, but then never actually get around to? The human figure, portraits, people, anatomy. Because eventually I think I would like to incorporate more people into my paintings, and it's going to take a lot of study, but I just never get around to it. Jessica Shippey asks, when did the urge to move to Scotland become a reality and why? Such a huge leap. Did you know anyone there, have family, traveled before? I moved here because my now husband is Scottish, and we had to decide between the US and Scotland. And I had just fallen head over heels in love with Scotland when I first visited. It was such an easy decision for me. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of hardships in moving to a new country, and I miss my friends and family, but For me personally and artistically, like, this is the place for me. I will put a link in the description to the video where Wolfie and I talk about how we met, which was on a train, by the way, and the process of moving here and all of that. Cynthia Hale asks, how was the adjustment moving from the US to Scotland? What were the biggest differences as well as challenges? Financially, it was really hard because the US dollar is weaker than the British pound. So when I transferred money over, it's like suddenly I had way less money. And I think the cost of living is a little bit higher here than where I was in Colorado. That might be different nowadays. And I also had to learn how to drive on the other side of the road here. I had to learn lots of new phrases. I had to learn how to understand the dialect or the accent, which can be very, very strong in some places, some people. And just lots of little cultural things here and there. But it's a country just like every other country. Like when you think of Scotland, you might think of certain things like castles or misty mountains or Loch Ness, Nessie, kilts, the things that you see in movies and shows. But obviously there's so much more to any country. There's so much more to Scotland. But we also have the regular stuff that every other country has, like plenty of towns and cities are kind of run down, or there's like bad parts of certain towns, or, you know, there's McDonald's and Starbucks and all sorts of other things, like normal things. You have to pay your taxes, you have to go to the doctor, you have to do all the things. And it's easy to romanticize moving to another country. And luckily, I can get immersed in just the beauty of Scotland very easily. Just even like a 10 or 20 minute drive down my road, and I'm just like in the most gorgeous landscapes. But yeah, it's normal life as well. Candace Oliver asks, how do you deal with burnout or art block? Like, do you have any tips on how to deal with those? Big, deep breaths. I go through it just like everyone else. I have times when I can't create anything, and I have times where I'm overflowing with creativity. It ebbs and it flows. And the longer I do this full time, the more I realize that is completely normal. And taking care of yourself emotionally and physically is so important. I can't stress that enough. If you aren't healthy as a human, physically or mentally, your art is going to suffer in so many ways. That's a hard lesson for me to learn, because if I could, I would just spend 24/7 painting and drawing. But the older I get, the more obvious it is that physical health especially plays a huge role in well-being. And I neglected mine for a while. Like, my physical health took a backseat to everything else in my life for years. Now I'm paying the price. I have carpal tunnel, I have repetitive stress injuries, I have scoliosis. I've had that my whole life, but that's even worse from sitting for long hours year after year. And the list goes on. And the last year or so is finally when I've taken responsibility for my health again, and I've been making changes to my life to incorporate exercise more regularly. Please, please, please don't neglect your health, because it catches up with you eventually. So how does that relate to creative burnout or art block, my mental and physical health? If those are in an imbalance, I have what feels like art block, because I'm not feeling well one way or the other. It's really hard to create anything. When it comes to creativity, I think it's really important to fill your cup. It's a saying, like, go out and experience life. How can you be expected to get excited about drawing or painting anything if you aren't really excited about life? So go for walks, maybe go for trips once in a while. Meet people, talk to people, go to art museums and get inspired, go to art bookstores and just pore over the books. Just go have experiences. Find something that really excites you about life, and that usually gives you a reason to want to create something or react to it in a way. For me, it's landscapes. So when I go out hiking, I'm overwhelmed with beauty and excitement, and I want to translate what I see to the paper. And that's directly how it impacts me. Andrew Gursky asked a few different questions, but I'll answer the personal ones now. What other hobbies do you enjoy besides art? Hiking, photography, those probably are obvious by now. I also really love like puzzle games. I do a lot of that. Or Wolfie turned me on to Sudoku recently, and I always thought it had to do with maths. I've never been good at mathematics. I struggled in school. I did it, but I struggled. And I just once I graduated, I was like, good, I don't ever have to do math again. Maths, sorry. Here they call it maths. I get in trouble if I don't say s. But it doesn't. Sudoku has nothing to do with that. So that's something I've been really loving. I also play video games, although I can't anymore because of my carpal tunnel and repetitive stress injury, which really sucks. Two things I really like doing, which are maybe kind of weird. I like packing for trips, even if I'm not going on a trip. Or if I have a trip in 6 months from now, I will get my bag and I'll pack and I'll unpack and repack and think of ways to make it better. What am I gonna bring and all of that kind of thing. And then the other thing is I love organizing. So cleaning my space and reorganizing furniture or making the shelving more efficient, making how I organize things more efficient. And so our space, our house constantly changes. I'm always rearranging things and just trying to make it more efficient. And of course, worshiping my 2 cats. Okay, next question. Just Someone asks, what challenges have you overcome as an artist and human in general? I've already shared a lot of things I've overcome as an artist and in my business. So as a person, as a human in general, I think one of the biggest ongoing struggles I have is depression and anxiety, which I've had my whole life. And when I was younger, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know about anxiety until I was in college, actually. And I became extremely depressed and anxious to the point where I couldn't really function. And I was just overwhelmed to the point where eventually I ended up in the school therapy office, and that's when I discovered therapy. And at that time I started doing medication, which eventually I weaned off of, and then therapy was my regular form of medication. Even now as an adult, I'm 37 now, I believe in the power of therapy to overcome whatever is going on with you. And don't ignore it. I don't know if depression or anxiety ever actually goes away. What I've learned is that there's ways to cope with it and to understand your triggers and avoid them or know when they're happening and how to deal with it. So a lot of it does come with time, with age, with experience, and being self-aware. When we're younger, a lot of times we're not self-aware enough to quite understand what's happening. So I'm really grateful that back then I found therapy. Just Someone's second question is, which myths, superstitions, and stories have you been brought up with? The biggest one was Bigfoot. Bigfoot is a huge myth, legend, whatever you can follow mainly in the Appalachian area of the U.S. And I grew up for many years in upstate New York, the countryside part of New York, and it was just always a thing. When we were kids playing in the woods, watch out for Bigfoot, or hearing the adults talking about Bigfoot stories around the campfire, stuff like that. It's funny. Okay, on to the practical side of the Q&A, which means, having to do with the process of painting or anything like that. So Jenny Medicine has a few questions. What do you do with your used water when you're painting outside? How do you dispose of it during or after? Okay, quickly, I'll answer that. I usually carry a small jar I have two different ones. I have a little glass jar and I have a Nalgene type bottle, which is leak proof, and pour the dirty water into that, keep it in the bag, bring it home. Or if I'm hiking and I'm near any kind of town, which usually has like free public toilets or facilities, I can just make a little detour and dump the water in the sink and fill it again. Does your water ever become too pigmented? Yes. In order to paint, I'll either collect seawater or nearby pond water or something, or I'll use my drinking water and then pour the dirty water into the empty jar whenever I need to, because it does become too pigmented sometimes. How do you clean your brushes off after a plein air painting session? So after painting outside, same way I do in the studio, soap and water. I have brush soap. There's so many different types you can get. Easy. Do you or did you use the same brushes for watercolor and gouache, or do you have dedicated types for each medium? I use them interchangeably, just depends what I need, but I do prefer certain types or styles of brushes for different styles, different mediums. Like for watercolor, I like to use pointed or round brushes, and for gouache, I prefer flat brushes, purely based on how I apply the paint. Since there are no gouache dot cards, how do you decide which new colors to add, especially early on in your gouache journey? Did you base it on watercolor? Just the digital colors online? When I was starting to get into gouache, I just bought similar colors to my watercolor by brands that I knew were high quality. I started out using Holbein Artist Gouache, I believe. After a while, I realized which colors I liked and didn't like, and it's been years now, so that's a lot of time to experiment. And now I've kind of settled on a selection of colors that I absolutely love that can allow me to paint anything I want to paint. Before we talk about supplies anymore, let me just say, because I'm doing art full time, I do tons of research, but I also consider any materials I buy as an investment. In a way, you could see it as a tax write-off kind of thing, but it's more than that. It's like, I know if I buy this, it's going to last me years, or if I use it quickly, I have to re-buy it every few months. It's just part of the job. I'm not like stingy with my supplies to the point where I don't use them, especially, and I'm not to the point where I am afraid to buy anything because I know I'm going to use it eventually. And if I buy something and I hate it and I never want to use it again, I just give it away. Someone out there will want something that you're using. Tori Capel asks, now that your Kickstarter has been completed and your books are completed, any thoughts about what you felt went well? What would you do differently? Any thoughts about a tutorial type book related to watercolor, gouache, oil, or about plein air for the beginner? Okay, so Kickstarter, what went well? I think the book design went well. People liked the book, which is really the most important thing. What I learned a ton along the way, so now next time I do one, it'll be much easier for me. What I didn't like, or what didn't go as well, and it wasn't the worst thing because it was fine in the end, but I had major issues with shipping. Because it was kind of the tail end of the pandemic lockdown situation, the shipping channels were all disrupted. So some people waited months and months and months for their books. Some people never got their books. So I had to reship. I had to take the hit financially and reship books. I thought I was going to have to replace more than I did. I only had to replace a handful, thankfully, and all of the ones that never made it to their destination, I was able to get a refund through Royal Mail, thankfully. So I really didn't lose out too much financially on that. It was just a huge stress and hassle. If I'm relying on a third party or someone else to do part of my job for me, like shipping or delivering, and it's not going well, that makes me look bad. And I really don't like that because I care a lot and I put all I have into everything I do, and yet the buyer can still have a bad experience. So that side of it turns me off of doing it again in the future, but I know I will because, again, the positives outweigh the negatives. So, and my thoughts about possibly making a tutorial style book is probably not anytime soon. I personally don't feel like anything I can contribute would be better in book form. than video form. Yoongi asks, correct me if I'm wrong, but I notice you don't really show drawings or paintings of people or animals. Why is that? I honestly don't know. I just don't have interest in it. I think part of it is that when I go out and I hike and explore and I'm in this vast landscape and I'm the only person for as far as I can see, I feel like I'm just in this wilderness. It's a very powerful feeling, and that is something that I like to convey in the painting. So adding a person adds a different type of narrative. I suppose I really like the idea that the viewer puts themselves in the landscape almost, or this just gets that sense of like wild, free, open wilderness. Had a little coffee break. Yoongi's next question. How do you find and plan for the locations you decide to paint? Every location I've seen you paint is so nice. Admittedly, I am spoiled for choice here, and I also do a lot of research online. So before I go anywhere, I look at Google Maps and I see the street view of where I'm going, and it gives me a little bit of direction so I at least know where to start. But a lot of times I just start walking or hiking and see what I find along the way. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's not. It's just the ones I share end up being the more beautiful, epic places because I think that's inspiring. But I also have had requests recently for going out to a boring location and painting because I guess that's something that a lot of people can relate to. Maybe you don't think there's anything inspiring around you, and it's like, how do you get over that hurdle? You want to go outside and paint, but it's boring. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know, and I'll maybe make a special video just dedicated to that. Yoongi's last question, and this is a question a lot of people have asked. When you first started out, did you get nervous going outside to paint? Or if you had any other fears, how did you overcome them? Yeah, I was definitely scared of not knowing what to expect. I like to be able to control situations, and it is just like an ongoing struggle in my life. I'm kind of a control freak. It's so unpredictable when you go outside and paint, and I think that's why it pushes me to grow as an artist, or one way that it does. You can't control every situation. You can't control the weather. People might be around and seeing what you're doing, and you just have to like ignore them or get over the fear of being judged. But the thing is, anytime I've gone out and like people have walked by and seen what I'm doing, no one has ever been mean, or at least not like to the point where it bothers me. Some people will look and be like, huh, and then kind of move on. But most people are just really curious, and they're like, wow, I've never seen an artist doing this outside. And they just want to ask, how is it your hobby? Is it what you do for a living? How did you start? Or they'll tell you about their art adventures or someone they know. And I think in general, people are just honestly curious, which I can completely understand, because when I go out and I see someone outside painting, I'm like, ooh, I want to see what they're doing, and I want to ask what their journey is. So one way that you can get over that, you can put headphones in your ears. That's usually a signal to people like, you know, I want my space, or I'm busy. Or find a place a little bit off the path. Maybe if the path is like around a park, you can either go into the a little bit into the park so that they'd have to make a special effort to walk over to you, which people usually won't do. Just finding ways to kind of get away from the crowded spots. If it's urban sketching, it is literally just something you have to get over. And again, most people are just super nice and curious, and it's no big deal. Especially if you say, hey, I just started. This is my first few times going out. I'm learning how to translate what I see to the paper, or tell them something about your supplies. It takes a little bit of the pressure off of having this expectation of like, I'm an artist, so I must be painting something good. No, it's not always about that. Like, you can change the conversation and talk about something else. Danielle asked in the similar vein of questions of going outside and painting. For me, it is really overwhelming, and I sometimes have a hard time picking scenes, and there's too much going on. How do you cope with people wanting to see or coming close? I already answered that. So the question about really feeling overwhelmed and how do you pick a scene? If that is something you struggle with, you can do different exercises. So go outside with one intention at least, maybe 2 or 3. So what I mean by that is you go outside and today you're going to paint a tree. That eliminates a lot of distractions. Now you're just looking for a tree. You'll maybe be walking for 5 or 10 minutes and you'll see a bunch of trees. Give yourself a time limit of like 10, 15, 20 minutes of just looking before you choose a subject. And then once the time is up, you have to choose a subject. That also eliminates the choice paralysis, I guess, is a way of putting it. So there's too many choices, you don't choose anything because you're too overwhelmed. Well, take away some choices. Or you can go out with a more vague intention of just taking color notes. And I did a whole video about that, like how I go out, just observe colors, do little swatches. Sometimes that leads into a painting, sometimes not. But it is so valuable either way because you're learning how to mix colors, learning how to mix what you see. And sometimes it's all you need. It's like a little catalyst that can then take you to the next step where, ooh, I'm suddenly inspired to paint this view. Now I'm going to paint it. Sometimes it's just about getting the brush moving. But I will admit that there are times I go out to paint. I have all my kit with me. I've walked 4 miles to get to this location. And I'm suddenly overwhelmed by the beauty. It's so beautiful that I feel like nothing I can ever do will do it justice. In those cases, I will sometimes just look and observe, because that is a super important part of going out and painting, is learning how to observe what you're seeing, how to start working in your mind. Maybe you're taking mental color notes or looking at the way things are laid out, looking at compositions, all sorts of things. It's not always about putting paint on the paper. You can learn so much just by observing and get familiar with a location. If I know I can go back to that location, it takes all the pressure off. If I'm traveling and it's somewhere I'm never going to be again, I'll definitely take photos and videos, but I'll at least try to do a sketch. No color, just pencil sketch. And again, sometimes just by getting the pencil or the paint moving, it inspires you to keep going and finish the painting. Most importantly, maybe, is taking the pressure off of doing anything perfectly, because you're not perfect. You're never going to do anything perfect. Get over it. We're all human and we all make mistakes and we all do things imperfectly, but that's the beauty of it. Nature might be perfect, but we won't be. So don't give yourself that added pressure of, oh, I have to paint a masterpiece. No, all you have to do is react to the situation. Take time, make the effort to actually absorb colors and the wind and the smells and the feeling of being there, because that's going to serve you much longer than obsessing over doing a perfect painting in the moment. Sandy Sweeta asks, I love your color choices. Thank you. You see purple and turquoise where I see gray. How do you know what colors to use that look so good and complement each other? Okay, so that comes with time and practice and repetition, trying things, realizing what doesn't work and what does work, and then doing what does work again, tweaking it a little, painting after painting after painting, year after year. All of that begins to add up. And also, I think it's important to have a general understanding of color theory, like the color wheel. Green and red are complementary colors. Learning how they play together, how they complement each other, or can distract from each other, or emphasize each other. Like, all of these little things about color, to me, it's fascinating, but it's also extremely confusing. And the only way I know how to understand it is to do it over and over and over again. And now I have a set of colors with, I have a set of watercolors. I have a set of gouache colors that I really, really love. And because I've been using the same colors for so long, I have a deeper understanding of them. And I'm not saying it's bad to go out and buy new colors all the time. It just can be confusing. So if you struggle with color, I think it's really important to choose limited palettes. And that limited palette can change day to day. But if you're focused on one limited palette, just focus on that and learn what it can do inside and out. Paint with it for a while, get really familiar with it, and then you really start to understand what colors work and what don't. And again, it's about reacting to the moment, reacting to that painting. So you do the painting, A lot of times it doesn't work and that's okay. You've learned from it. But now you know next time maybe you'll tweak the blue a little bit or try a totally different blue. And all of those little steps add up. Playing with different weird combinations of color or unnatural combinations of color has always been part of my journey, part of my thought process. I'll put a link to a video that talks about my full color journey, because I think that's kind of where this tangent is leading, and you might find it interesting or helpful. Yoi asks, when do you choose to paint in watercolor and when do you choose gouache? And why? How do you know which one to pick? This is pretty much just based on the logistics of the situation. And by that, I mean, if I'm going out on these big hikes, like yesterday, 8-mile hike, I had the lightest, smallest kit I could possibly carry, which is my tiny little 6-color portable painter micro and a tiny little water kit and a tiny little brush kit and pencils and like the minimal amount of supplies I could possibly have. And when I'm outside with the intention of hiking and painting, doing like a travel nature journal, I want to use a fast material, which is watercolor. For me, watercolor is the fastest. It dries fast, it's easy to use, it's easy to set up and put away. It's just very conducive to doing a little sketch, moving on, doing another little sketch, moving on. If I'm going out with the intention of being in a place for an hour or two, like maybe I'm just going on a hike to a viewpoint and I'm going to sit in that viewpoint for an hour, I'm a little more relaxed with time, so I'll bring my gouache kit. My gouache kit is a little bit bigger and heavier, so it's not like, it's easy to set up and put away, but the process of gouache for me is a little bit slower. It can be quick, but I enjoy gouache more when I can take my time, I can work in several layers, because I love layering gouache, and it's just a totally different approach for me, so I like to do it. I can do it fast, but I like to do it when I have a little bit more time. Bigger stuff like acrylics and oils, I used to take those out more often, but now because of just my workflow has changed when I'm outside, I pretty much only do the big stuff, the canvases with all the different tubes and everything in the studio. Yoi asks, how long does a plein air painting usually take? How can I paint faster on location with a toddler and tired spouse? Okay, if you're going with anyone, you just have to know that it's not about you. If you're going out with someone, a spouse or a toddler or a group of people just going on a hike, it's about them. It's about you as a group. It's about going on the hike. If you want to go out to study, to go out specifically for painting, go by yourself. Hopefully your spouse or your friends, they understand that you're an artist, and if you're stopping for a quick lunch break or just some water, say, hey, just give me 5 minutes, I want to do a quick little sketch of this tree. But just understand that, you're probably not going to have an hour to sit there and paint. Pinar asks, thanks for your inspiring videos. Thanks for watching them. I want to learn how do you decide that a painting is finished and ready to go? How do you decide when it's done? That's such a hard question, especially if, like me, you really like expressive, sometimes very loose paintings. It's a different answer than if you're doing more like hyper-realism style or realism. If it's realistic, it's done. In our case, where we're going for more of expressive style, you have to, for me, I just stop ahead of time, because it's so easy to overdo it. When I get to the point in the painting where I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just do a little bit more. Maybe I'll just add one thing over here. I step away, because you can always keep going, but you can't go backwards. So step away early and give yourself a minute to look at other things, do something else, and then look at the painting with fresh eyes. It's more likely that you're not going to overdo it in that situation. If you're just sitting for like 2 hours straight, only working on that painting, and you're not moving or doing anything else, first of all, that's not really healthy, but also you can almost become paint blind and you just don't see it clearly or freshly enough. So take a minute, take a breath, look away, rest your eyes, focus on something else for a minute. It's really good to have stretch breaks when you're painting anyway, whether you're inside or outside. So use that as an opportunity to do a little stretch break or get some water or something. Then you can go back to it and kind of make decisions based on where you're at. There's so many times when I stop a painting early, or at least I think it's early, and then I take an hour or even a day break from it and I look back at it again and I'm like, this is done. This is exactly what I was trying to do. But if I had kept going, I definitely would have overdone it, and it just would have lost some of that freshness. I feel like this has just been like a really long pep talk for painting outside, but if you love doing it, you're gonna do it no matter what. All right. Andrew asks, what do you look for in a composition and how do you get commissions? Oh, those are two very different things. I don't know why I grouped those together. Commissions come to me. I don't seek them out, but I also don't do a lot of commissions anymore because I don't enjoy them as much. But what do you look for in a composition? In a composition, it's about keeping the eye moving. You can also learn about the different theories of composition, like the rule of thirds or all of the different things. I don't want someone to look at a painting and just get stuck on one single thing or, obsess about one area. I want to create an environment in the painting where it feels good to kind of let your eyes wander, and you look over here and you see some detail and then you see some other colors and it just keeps going. So a lot of that for me has just been practice, trying different layouts in a painting. You can do little thumbnails beforehand, so a black and white drawing or painting, and try different layouts, try the trees on the left and on the right and all of that. On to the business section of the questions, and there aren't many. I think I answered most of these in the comments when they asked. This is from Megan Brown. Hi, Sarah. Hi. As an artist running your own business, where did you learn to navigate the business side of things? Do you have any tips for artists who would like to earn money from their work, but who don't know where to begin setting up a business? I touched a little bit about business in the beginning when I talked about passive income sources. I feel like it's very important to diversify your income. Over the last few years, I've learned the ups and downs of relying on one thing, like Twitch. When I streamed, I was just using that. And then I was kind of relying on social media. And then, all of those things can change in an instant. You don't own Facebook or Twitch or YouTube. They make the decisions about their business and you just kind of go along with it. So if suddenly tomorrow they either disappear or change something important and their users go away, so does your business. So have many irons in many fires. That's a really good safety net. And for me, like, everything I've learned about business has just been trial and error, lots of errors, trying lots of things, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and at all times trying to realize if what I'm doing is leading me towards my ultimate goals and ideal lifestyle. Because you can get stuck doing something like just commissions, and maybe a few years in, you are so burned out and you hate commissions, but that's your only income, or that's like the majority of your income. Learning how to move into something else is going to be a lot harder. Like, it takes time to build up a Patreon, it takes time to build a following and a newsletter and all of these things. Just experiment a little at first, especially when you have another job to support yourself with. Don't just quit your job and try to go full-time in art without any plans or any following or anything, because then it's going to, unless you have a huge amount of savings or a trust fund, it's not going to work out so well. So the other part of that question was, do you have any tips for artists who would like to earn money? Again, I think it has to do with trying lots of different things and seeing what works for you individually. I know some people who absolutely love doing commissions. That's all they want to do. Commissions can be a really, really good source of income, and I did enjoy them on occasion, but as a whole, that process, I didn't enjoy. It didn't fulfill me as an artist. So I moved on and moved on to other things. Henrique asks, where I live is very hard to make money with art. In your case, if someday you need more money to get a better retirement, what do you do? This is just hypothetical. I'd like to think that you make a lot of money with your beautiful art. Your videos are amazing. Thank you. Well, I don't make a ton of money with my art. I make enough money and that's all I care about. I make enough money to pay my bills, my student loans, to do what I need to do, and with enough freedom to buy the supplies I need to buy, like the business expenses, and once in a while go on little trips. So that's my ideal life. The only reason I would ever want more money is to buy a house, to buy a camper van or something like that. And if I have those goals, which I do, I save money, and I can be very frugal when I need to. I was very frugal for most of my life, and I still am. But different times, different goals require different amounts of frugality. In the case of saving up for retirement, first of all, I don't think I'll ever retire. I might retire from making money from art, but I'm going to be painting until the day I die. Like in my last breath, I would love to be painting. This is what I leave with the world, Back in the day when I was doing photography, I was like, oh, I'm going to learn how to run a business from scratch. Like, I realized I hate doing accounting. I hate doing maths and so many of the admin sides of it. I learned enough to get by and to exist as a business owner. And I'm not a pro at advertising or any of that. I just do what works for me in that time of my life. From the beginning though, I have had an accountant or a tax person or whatever you call them in your country. It's worth paying someone to do this thing that I absolutely hate, and to know that I won't get audited or get into trouble with that side of things. Just that was a business expense from the very beginning that I was willing to pay. I know other artists who love doing that side of things and are really good at it, and wow, I'm impressed. But it's just I can't, as much as I wish I could, I can't wrap my head around it. So I pay a professional to do it. Every country is going to have different rules and regulations for setting up a physical business. A lot of times, like an accountant or a tax professional knows the answers to your questions. So when you hire them, you get all of that information as well, and they'll guide you through the actual steps of doing it. But then the rest is up to you, bringing in the business, marketing, all of that side of it. And like I said, I just I try different things and I see what works. And that's why for me, it's a very slow build up over the years to where I am now. And, wasn't an overnight success. Just know it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work, but if you love doing it, it's worth it. It's every step of the way, it's worth it. Like Wolfie actually jokes that I'm his retirement plan, but it's kind of not a joke, because ultimately we want to be working together. Like he'll be working with me in the business, so it'll be us together working towards our dreams and our retirement and everything all in one. So yeah, technically, I guess I am the retirement plan. I think what I want to leave everyone with today is just knowing that there is no right answer, no one answer to any of these questions, or any of the questions that might be bouncing around your head. So much of it is about trying a certain thing, a technique or a business strategy or an advertising strategy or something, seeing if it works. And it does take a while to kind of figure that out. And managing all these moving parts is really challenging and really stressful. So it can be very overwhelming. So I recommend that you really put a focus on your mental health, your well-being, your physical health, because without those things, the rest won't exist. And it's okay to ask questions. I love answering questions, and obviously I'm not an expert at any one thing, but I like sharing my experience so that hopefully other people can get inspired by it, or maybe one thing I said resonates with you and you want to try it yourself. So I guess that's it for this Q&A. If you have any other questions, ask in the comments. Maybe if I get enough, I'll do another Q&A down the road. But I hope you guys enjoyed this and you're staying inspired. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you all soon. Take care.